I'm Mitch Willey, and I'm very excited to be here, delighted to be in this beautiful and historic city. And it's poised and is at such an exciting time, particularly in the travel and tourism industry, as we heard from Becca and many of the ministers today. So it's wonderful to be part of this moment in your history. I was lucky enough to witness another moment in two other countries' history much earlier in their exciting sort of explosion economically and commercially. In 1988, I was asked by the Soviet Academy of Sciences to come to Moscow to be part of a team to draft their joint venture laws. It was the first time in their history that they had allowed more than, or contemplating allowing more than 49% ownership in any companies in that country. So we created a joint venture forum and ultimately wrote the laws that allowed foreign ownership. And of course, what happened after perestroika was this immense growth and interest of their economy, and including travel and tourism. 1 year later, I was asked by Lech Wałęsa, who of course then was the head of Solidarity, to come to Poland to do the exact same thing. And we drafted their joint venture laws. And in fact, my law firm and I trained their top corporate lawyers in international joint ventures, multinational transactions. And what I saw there was this explosion of entrepreneurship and this interest in that country. The possibilities were endless. And as a lawyer, I was involved in not just the drafting of the laws, but also in negotiating and representing mostly American multinationals doing business in both the former Soviet Union and in Poland. And as exciting as it was to be part of the restructuring of those laws and that economy, what I thought was the most exciting was to be the entrepreneurs who are deeply engaged in these discussions and exploring the opportunities, which were so immense and so exciting. And I saw this huge opportunity in travel and tourism with people discovering these countries, just as people are discovering Georgia now and your rich heritage and culture and the cuisine that I've been lucky enough to experience the last 2 days, which is phenomenal. I think you're poised as well. You're further in front of this wave, but I'm delighted to be here to be part of this discussion. People ask me often, because I guess I was a disruptor in the travel industry, do I think that the travel segment and tourism is as ripe for innovation as other economic sectors? And the conventional wisdom is that it is not. That it is what it is. You can't reinvent, history. You can't reinvent culture. But I don't agree. I think there are nuances to this, and I think they're perhaps a little bit less obvious today than they were 20 years ago when I founded Time and Place. But I think they are abundant, and I think that if you look hard and listen well, you will find them. I'm going to give you a small example. Richard's talk was so fascinating, and the experiences that he has had are so amazing in the forefront of technology. And basically about 90% of what he was talking about, I don't understand. I don't know those terms. I don't know what OEM is. I didn't when I was a lot younger, and I certainly don't today. But what I did know was real estate and the luxury travel and hospitality sector. So to really bring it down to very basic levels, I had in the year 2000, I have an addiction. It's real estate. And I owned 9 vacation homes in 2000. Paris, Palm Springs, Nantucket, Naples, Florida. This house in the lower left on the screen is actually the Frank Sinatra estate called Twin Palms, which I owned. And it was an iconic home. If you look carefully, you can see there's a breezeway on one side of the pool. This was designed in 1947 by B. Stuart Williams, who went on to become one of America's most famous architects. But he was a young architect at the time, and Frank Sinatra engaged him to design his home. He had just made a bundle of money on From Here to Eternity. It was literally the first big amount of cash that he had. And he said to Stuart Williams, I want to have a house in Palm Springs. I'm not sure how many of you know Palm Springs, but it's a desert community. And the whole idea about Palm Springs is sort of indoor-outdoor living being seamless. And so he asked Stuart Williams to design him the home that he wanted, which was a Southern colonial mansion. In fact, it would have looked a lot like this property, which I owned, which is the Relais Chateau Hotel in Charlottesville, Virginia. And Stuart Williams said, oh, you do not want that kind of a house in Palm Springs. And he said, with an expletive, I earn the money, I will have what I want. And he said, I'll do a favor for you. He said, I will design a house that I think you should have, and I will design the Southern Colonial house as well. And you pick at the end. Fortunately, he chose the design that is now Twin Palms. And I mentioned the breezeway between the main house and the pool house. Pretty clever idea. That pool, which I think you can tell from the photo, was actually built in the shape of a grand piano, Frank Sinatra. The breezeway has cutouts in the roof, and at noon, they form the black and white keys on the grand piano when the light hits at noon. It was also, by the way, the largest swimming pool in the state of California, public or private, in 1947. So in 2001, I had a problem. I had all of this real estate, and unlike other people who may own that amount of real estate, I had no business owning it in the first place. Secondly, I had to rent those properties. I had to be very focused on renting. So I had three factors at work which created disruption and innovation. I had deep fear that I wasn't going to be able to rent these homes. I had a need to rent them, and I had a passion for real estate. So I wasn't going to give up on this idea of owning these various homes, and I decided that there was a business there. And much like Richard indicated with Uber, where you have people who need a ride and limousines that are sitting empty, I had sort of the same situation, that I knew other people who had luxury vacation homes, and they were sitting empty 49 to 52 weeks a year. Rich people don't use these homes, they're too busy, and they use them occasionally. And then we had consumers that I knew from my own homes were willing to pay, $42,000 a week to rent a house. And I had a house in Nantucket, and we rented from May until September, straight through, $42,000 a week, different people, no problem. But the issue was that neither the homeowners nor the guests were having a good experience. The homeowners were having huge abuse. I personally witnessed that. When I would list my home before I created Time and Place, I had strings cut in the grand piano. I had purple bubble gum on $300 decorator fabric. I had theft, which you won't believe, from people who can afford to pay $42,000 a week. And the guests were also not having a good experience. Why? Because the people who they gave to be the rental agents for these homes were the people in the real estate company who couldn't make it in sales. So we were getting the lowest end of the food chain to represent these people who were paying quite a bit of money to rent their homes. So there was a demand by homeowners and there was a demand by consumers. And I was an unusual homeowner because I wasn't rich and I had to find a solution to rentals. Most of these other people who have homes that can command that amount of rent are wealthy individuals. But they're wealthy because they're frugal and they're smart with their money. And what they were saying to me was, I'm not going to rent my home because I'm worried about the abuse, I'm worried about theft, I'm worried about what is going to happen. And I had a light bulb moment when I was renting my house in Nantucket, and then one of the first weekends in December is called Christmas Stroll. And I got a call from a friend of mine who's a realtor, said, Mitch, I walked by your house on Lilly Street, and this actually was a house that rented for more than $42,000 a week. And he said, I walked by your house on December 5th, and by my estimate, there's about 1.5 feet of snow on the inside of your house. And by my count, eight stray cats. And I had $400 decorator pillows that were getting torn apart. I called the realtor and I said, Susie, I just got this call. And she said, obviously somebody left the door open. And I sort of said, yeah, no shit. I figured that out. I said, don't you go to check the house after the guests have left because I have nice art and valuable silver and so forth and so on. She said, not my job. I said, really? What is your job? Because you're getting paid $60,000 a year on commissions on my one house. And she said, oh, that's for the cleaning staff. I said, oh, you mean the cleaning staff that changes every other week who wouldn't know that things are missing? And I said, so what is your job exactly? And she said, I'm a matchmaker. And I thought, okay, I'm doing all the heavy lifting here. I could hire somebody full-time to be just my concierge for that one house. So the idea was created. And actually, I started this company in 2001, and it's a sort of funny anecdote, but I was actually housed at APCO deciding I wanted to start this other business and hired some young people to create a website. Back in 2001, that was like a new thing, create a website. Oh, what's that? And I said to them, I was traveling to Europe on some other business, and I said, I'm coming back on Tuesday, and I'd really like to see the website live when I land. And they said, that's great. So they called me Monday night, and they said, Mitch, we'll be live tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I got in a plane in Paris, took off. That was September 11th. And the website did go live on September 11th, 2001. Not the most propitious time to start a luxury travel business. But as many of you know, sometimes down markets are actually a good time to start a business because you learn how to adapt to adversity. And I realized that this was a technology play in a way, because before 2001, you didn't really have a way to search for rental homes or anything other than calling a realtor in a given destination. But I also realized pretty quickly, just in talking to friends, that this idea of renting a home short term wasn't going to be that easily acceptable. It made a lot of sense to me, but as I was talking to other individuals, they're like, no, that's weird. I don't think I want to do that. I mean, this is hard to get your head around today because it's so prevalent with, obviously, Airbnb. But people were afraid of the unknown. They were really skeptical about what they were going to get. And there are a lot of things that I did wrong when I founded and launched and grew Time and Place. But there were, I mean, a lot of things wrong. But there are a couple of things that I did right. And that was that I did realize that people were going to be, they were going to be fearful because it was the unknown, because they had been used to going to luxury hotels. And again, this is at a price point where people, you know, are paying a couple of $100s a night at least for a hotel room in a given city. And I was introducing this concept of short-term rentals. And believe it or not, in 2001, when I would talk to people, potential investors and others, and I said, I have this idea that you could rent an apartment in Paris for like 3 nights. They're like, that is so stupid. Nobody will do it. They'll be distrustful. How are you going to get people to give their homes to you? Who are you going to ever get to want to rent an apartment for 3 nights? That's for kids. That's not for like people who have, you know, the means to do something else. And I said, I know, but think about this. If you could rent like a 2-bedroom apartment in Paris as opposed to a 10-by-10 hotel room for the same price, and you're traveling with your children, wouldn't you rather do that? And in Paris, for instance, there's a law, you cannot have more than 3 people in a hotel room. So I have 2 daughters, so my wife and I would travel. We had to get 2 hotel rooms in Paris every time we traveled with our 2, you know, teenage daughters. It's expensive. The other thing that struck me was when I was commuting to Europe from Washington for a couple of years, and I would bring my wife and children over, and we go out for breakfast, and the girls would want, you know, cereal and hot chocolate, and I'd want an egg white omelet. Well, you can't get cereal, you can't get an egg white omelet in a French cafe, and 80 euros later, which was about $120, nobody was happy. And I thought, how cool would it be if we had our own apartment and we could go, they could have the cereal in the apartment. I could go out and get fresh hot croissant. I could take them with me so they could see how to shop in a French market. And I've just saved myself about $100 a day doing that. And so, you know, I thought that would be a great idea. So that's how I started buying these places. So when I launched Time and Place, the 3 things I got right was I realized that people they needed to be drawn in to this idea. So I said to my developers, we have to have amazing photographs. We have to have, they have to be so alluring that when people look at these, they just want to keep looking. And we now dub it real estate porn. And it is. I mean, you just want to keep looking at the next photo to see what you're going to get. And I said the other thing we have to do is to make these houses look as much like luxury hotel rooms on steroids as possible. So everything has to be white sheets, white towels. You can't have too much crazy art or weird design. It has to be a little bit universal in its appeal. And the third thing I realized was, you know, thinking about anticipating the sort of pushback, what people would ask, yeah, that's great, sounds nice, but what if I'm traveling to a foreign destination and my kid gets sick in the middle of the night? What do I do? And I thought a lot about that, and I thought, We need to have a concierge who is available 24/7. Mobile phones were just coming into existence at that point, and that they would be, bilingual. They would speak English. 95% of our client base was North American to begin with, and they would be there in the event of a safety emergency. That only happened once in the 15 years that I was the owner and president of Time and Place. And it was not a child, it was an adult, it was in Paris. It was actually a friend of the Bush family. And she got sick in the middle of the night. And what happened was the concierge did go to the hospital, translated not only to describe the diagnosis, but to navigate insurance issues. But what very quickly happened, and this is again a reference back to Richard, there are tangential businesses that spring from these core businesses. The tangential business for Time and Place was concierge services. And what became apparent very, very quickly was that what people really loved is having my concierge in Paris or wherever it was, Buenos Aires, get them into the restaurant where they were the only person speaking American. They did not want to travel. They didn't want to follow the typical guidebooks. They wanted to have a unique experience. And they could get them in after hours at Hermès, have private tours of the Louvre, and they could do all of that kind of thing. So it became basically a marketing hook, which became pretty effective. I was just going to mention, because the photo is up there, this is the Clifton Inn. It's an inn in Charlottesville, Virginia, which I owned for 35 years. I just sold it a year ago. And it was a dilapidated farmhouse. And I had this concept, because I'd lived and practiced law in Europe, that I could bring Europe to the South. Again, it was actually disruptive. People didn't think it would work. Clifton was named one of the 10 best restaurants in America by USA Today and was one of only 29 Relais and Chateau hotels in the United States. And the concept was to bring European hospitality and an aesthetic to a Southern environment and sort of imbue it with the architecture. So fast forward, by 2005, we had over 600 homes on 4 continents and 40 different unique destinations. One of the things that happened, which was pretty exciting, was we knew we had a story to tell. And one of my pieces of advice to you is make sure you have a story that you can tell quickly and well, and that is compelling enough through whatever medium is available and appropriate today to get people's interest. And we were featured in a ton of newscasts and magazines and newspapers and so forth. I mean, Dawn and I have been talking about this. That sort of doesn't exist today in the same way. But we had 38 million media hits a year. I asked my publicist to put that into context. That would be like being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal every single day of the year. That's what this little company was able to generate. Why? We had a sexy story. We had a disruptive story. We didn't call it that then. And it was great photography. So you need to find that niche. So lessons learned. How to take a small business idea into a big multinational idea. Identify the gap. We've talked about that. There was a gap between homeowners who wanted to rent their homes and consumers who wanted to rent nice properties but not having a good experience. As I said, passion, fear, and personal commitment are key factors, in my view, of success in innovation. Secondly, question why this hasn't been done before. You're not the only person who had this idea, or others have tried it and have failed. And you need to keep asking yourself, why is that? What did they do wrong? Really drill down into the details of what they did, if it has been tried, what they didn't do well, and what you can do differently. One of the concepts I had was we really had to brand this. So you had to feel like you were staying in a luxury hotel. So we had Jo Malone soaps and shampoos co-branded with Time and Place. Frette linens at that point was talked about linen brand. We used both Frette linens and Garnier Thibault, and they had Garnier Thibault for Time and Place, and as well as Waterworks fixtures. So co-brand. It also gives you a great good housekeeping stamp of approval, a great imprimatur as well. I would say that as exciting and thrilling as it was to be a visionary in creating this business and this industry to some extent, that I faced the innovator's dilemma, which is I was too early in. It would have been financially more remunerative to me to be an early adapter who took this idea and then sort of exploited it and took it to another level. And I sold my company 6 years ago, and I did fine. I did okay. But I look at One Fine Stay or luxury retreats or, God forbid, Airbnb, and I was nowhere in that realm. And I do have the personal satisfaction of sort of thinking about this and creating it, but not the financial satisfaction that they're experiencing. The third thing I say is surround yourself with skeptics. There's been a little bit of discussion about that today. Entrepreneurs are by nature, and they're deep inside them, they're optimists. No, there's no object they can't overcome. And that what is indeed what makes them successful, but it is also a blind spot. You don't see the problems, you don't see the issues, and because you always think you can overcome them. So surround yourself with skeptics who you respect, who will tell you, Mitch, that's probably not going to work, or we need to adjust it. Focus mostly on the bad case scenarios, worst case scenarios, because you're really good at doing best case scenarios. You need to be thinking about worst case scenarios, and that may actually lead to a better business model and a better concept, but also will protect you from downturns or adversities in the marketplace. You've heard this many times, raise far more capital than you think you need. You always think you have enough. Richard was referring to the fact that Airbnb pitched this to a friend of his who's a successful venture capitalist, and he wasn't interested. I pitched my idea a number of times. I was stubborn enough, I guess, that I self-funded, and that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I should have gotten more capital. Wish I had. Would have probably made a lot more money in the end had I done that. I previously indicated that I was lucky enough to get all of this media attention. I never could have afforded the exposure that we had. And as I've indicated, today's marketplace is different. Maybe there's a bit of social media there. So much of it is paid, advertising and trying to get this kind of following and going viral and so forth. But find out what it is that may help you get sort of free press. Finally, I'd say surround yourself with employees who are smarter than you, and board members who are smarter than you and who are really invested in your success. Not their success, your success. Entrepreneurs often, frankly, they are the smartest person in the room, but they 100% think they're the smartest person in the room. And they need to be surrounded with people who definitely are smarter than they, or at least have different skill sets. And again, referencing back to an earlier discussion, capitalize on the tangential business opportunities. As I indicated in my case, Time and Place created this whole sub-network of concierges around the world who've gone on and made a lot of money creating these concierge services, not just for my homes, but for the homes they were representing for my competitors or others, and that has been an enormously successful business. I didn't capitalize on that. I was trying to meet payroll next week. I couldn't think that far down the road, but I wish I had. So I'll leave you with one thought. Had a conversation with Nick just before here, and we have different views about the opportunity for travel and tourism and whether there is any opportunity for any new big ideas beyond locally exploiting an existing idea. I believe there are, and this is my new big idea, is that I think you combine luxury accommodations with tailored experiential travel coupled with educational and recreational experiences for multi-generations. It's a mouthful, but this is basically geared towards baby boomers who have a lot of money, and it's a huge demographic. And they are out there and they are spending money, and they're traveling with their families, 3 generations often. And if you can find a business that appeals to them, they're committed to lifelong learning, they are active physically, even beyond the age of 60, and people are not meeting that niche, and there's an opportunity there. Thank you.